Okay, back again after a brief pause. I was getting a little winded before. And now I want to talk about the mountain. The mountain is a very important place for the Garrett family. In 1882, our great-grandfather, Philip C. Garrett, was spending the summer in Catskill, New York, to get away from the seaport of Philadelphia, which can be, and get a lot of mosquitoes and things. It's not the best place to be in a hot seaport in the summer. So he went to Catskill, and then somehow he went across the river to Hudson. He got on a train. He probably went to Chatham, and then he got on another train and went from Chatham down to the little hamlet in New York State of Copiague Falls. And somehow, probably by carriage, he took his wife up the mountain into Massachusetts to the town of Mount Washington, Massachusetts, founded in 1779. It's like a plateau above the valley. The valley usually is about 700 feet above sea level. And Mount Washington is about 1,600 feet above sea level in the flat, encircled by mountains. The mountains, that means there's a differential of 900 feet. And the mountains go up, most of them are around 2,000 feet. They're hills, they're rolling hills, but there are one of them, which is the highest mountain in southern Massachusetts, called Mount Everett, and it goes up to about 2,600 plus feet above sea level. He purchased an old farm called Lee Farm in the southern part of that township. And there was an old farmhouse on it, and it was not too large in structure. And that was it. It had a barn and a chicken house. It must have been very hard farming there. But they had a number of fields that were cut down and made into fields. And that was the beginning of a summer coming. They had a family, let's see, that family was a daughter, at any rate, he was my great-grandfather on the paternal side, and he built, for his own use, a fairly good-sized house called Wildmere, which was to the north of the farmhouse, and it was on a ridge area. So it was about, the farmhouse was at 1,804 feet above sea level. At one time, it was the highest house in Massachusetts. Now there's one in Beckett, which is not too far off from there, where there's one higher. But then there was another house built in 23, a Sears Kit House, and that's where my cousin Joan Rice Faulkner and her family have summered for many, many years. The Wildmere house was torn down mostly except for his study. And then Edward Bulkley, who married my cousin Suzanne, he and she added on to the house their own specifications. That house is owned by her still. She summers from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. She goes up there in the summer and spends it out in the highlands. But at any rate, this mountain hamlet is a very, at one time when we were children, there were 40 people who resided there, so you can see it'd be pretty slim picking as far as human beings. It's a harsh place to live in, but it has drawn the interest of three of my generation chose to live there as their legal residents. The first of them was my younger brother, Harry Leopold Jeffries Garrett, who moved there in 1959 after coming out of the United States Army, and has lived in time on the crossroads for all that time, or much of that time, and raised his family with two daughters, and a son. Both of them, one daughter lives in Iowa, but the rest of them live on Mount Washington. And my tie is that I would go there in the summers, and the first summers I would stay with my parents for about 1940. Before that, I stayed with my grandparents for short periods of time in their house, which is called Birchcliff. That's now owned by cousin Suzanne's daughter and one of her cousins, her cousin's cousin. In any event, what happened with the Garrett farm is that the boys, the twins, moved off and away from their wife's mother-in-law, and then the girls took over for the mountain houses. So the descendants of Eleanor Worcester Garrett Rice Sangree live up there. We have preserved as a family a 60-acre tract with a small pond, Lee Pond, to where it's one of the few ponds in Massachusetts that has no structures around it. And we've put restrictions to where nobody's ever going to build a house that can overlook that pond. So that's rather a good feature, I guess you'd say, environmentally. In any event, so I got going up there as a young kid, and it's a very impressive place in the summer. It's so beautiful. On my birthday, which is June 20th, you have the mountain laurel going crazy. It's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Somewhat analogous to the cherry blossoms that I would see in Japan. I saw it in Japan. And so Harry moved up there, and he's a very nice guy, and I like to be around him whenever I can. So eventually I got to thinking about having a house myself. Well, what happened was he bought this house. A lady named Edith Lambert built it. She was the stepdaughter of a wetback. In that case, it was Russell Wetback, which is his wife's uncle. And so Edith built the house for herself as a vacation place I think she lived in Vermont, which is only about 50 miles north of it. In any event, she built in 1950 sort of a kid home. It's got a cellar, and it had 3 little bedrooms and 1 bath, and it's a very functional but not inspiring dwelling. And so at any rate, we made a deal, Harry and I made a deal. I bought it from him. We made the deal in a John boat in Heron Lagoon, right across the street from this house right here. It was a funny deal in that he ended up having me pay, I think 3 times what he had in it. And I was glad to do it because he had to unload the house, or wanted to unload the house, and I thought I needed a house. So it's very good. It's close to his house, and it's on about 3 acres, and it must be maybe 1,000 feet under roof. There's a porch that faces south. And then through the years, I put on a garage for 1 car. It was an old Buick Skylark I built for it that was about 20 feet long, and then 12 feet wide. And then I wanted to have a bathroom, so I added another shower, commode, sink there, put in baseboard heating, so that serves really as the guest house now, called it annex. I don't think I've ever used it for a garage. but I suppose someday somebody will. At any rate, we did that deal about 1979, somewhere in that area. And it worked out to where I could begin to go there shortly thereafter. I had retired, I guess finally in '84 or something like that. So it's proved to be a pleasant place. My second wife, I gave her interest, so I had to buy that back when we got divorced. At any rate, I've remodeled it. I put the larger bedroom was in the front. That's where my brother's wife's mother had her last episode, and she never liked to come in the house after that. But I added the 2 small bedrooms into one in the rear of the house, and now that serves as the master bedroom. This place, I mentioned the laurel at my birthday in June 20th. There also is a mountain, in around Columbus Day, is the God's paintbrush, the great array of colors. The trees there, particularly the maples, are outstanding, but it's just a very wonderful place for nature. Now I'm going to tell you a story. I told you that I had met my wife, Anne, there in 1943. When I was down in New Zealand, I went to the Hagley Park in Central West Christchurch and spent 2 full days in that park. It was a glorious experience, and the vision of somebody 150 years ago, before that, starting this garden, and now it's fully mature. It's just outstanding that those people had that vision. But I got to thinking to myself as I was traveling around on this walkabout, when I got to Australia, I called our mother up and I said, "He has a lot next to one he gave me between the Crossroad and Old Clanton Pond Road. And I'd like to begin to have a mini garden." I thought there would be something that would interest me, although I was not an avid gardener. I thought it would be interesting to me to do something like that. And so when I married Anne, I found that she was not only, she was a master gardener trained in the state of Connecticut. In fact, there's a couple of parks in Connecticut that she had a part in designing, and one in Bridgeport for sure. So I said to her, since we were both 64, we would never have children together, so I said, let our baby be a garden. And so for the past, we started work on that thing. We carved it out of the natural forest. The natural forest has 10 different species, indigenous species. I had started to carve, when I came back from Australia, I started to flag the trees that I thought might be the best specimens to keep, and then let the town people use the hardwood because they burn and heat their houses, some of them, my brother for sure, with the hardwoods, so that they could take them out, and that would be helpful to us to clear the land, and it was. And then my brother gave us 2 old rotary mowers that he'd gotten from a guy named Walter in the Valley Church, Irish guy, nice guy. He's dead now. Anyway, Ann and I actually covered the underbrush with those mowers that we pushed it through there. And except for the northeast corner where Ted Dombrowski had a brush hog, and he cleared that particular land and saved me probably a month or 2 of work. I didn't have any big equipment. But then we did the same thing with a field that my brother Harry did. You've got a piece of property which is fairly flat. We could make a play field there. So we designed it 330 by 330 or 2.5 acres. And that's not contiguous to this garden, but it's fairly close to the town center. This garden is in fact in the town center. And we did a deal with the town. We said, if you can integrate another 2 acres, which had been given by the family to the town for the purpose of moving a schoolhouse there, we can then build a mini garden and have the benefit of the parking in the town center there. And so we did the deal, and the deal was that we would turn the garden over to the town. So the town would have a 6-acre town center garden, which is rather unusual, as you all know. Usually towns, at the value of the land, is people like to develop that out for themselves along other things. But I didn't have the need nor interest in doing something like that. I wanted to have my wife and I a place that we could say is ours together. So we've worked on that, as I say, we started, the marker says there, 1998, I think is when we actually physically got going on that thing. And in the interim, we had to go throughout this country and Europe to look at a lot of labyrinths, because she wanted to put a labyrinth there. And she set that thing up Sunday afternoon years ago with a guy named Colin Dunbar, a British guy. And it's about 70 feet in diameter. Unfortunately for them, they put ropes to find the walkways there for the labyrinth. So then she realized that wasn't going to work. So we put in shale rock, and that didn't satisfy her. So we finally ended up by getting a lot of Mount Washington Berkshire marble and defining them by those rocks there, and taking the red shale rocks out and throwing them into a stone wall. So that's been rather an interesting project, and people like to go there quietly and in solitude and just walk there. It's now got a lot of moss in there, and we're hoping that maybe someday it will be all moss, like the Japanese moss garden that I said in Kyoto. But you do something like that, and if you haven't got experience, you learn some lessons as the time flies. Because with the cutting we did in the mid-'80s, those trees have since then matured a lot, such that we had to spend thousands of dollars to cut a lot of them out of there so that we could have the sun as fuel for the specimen trees which we were bringing in. So there's a botanical gardens in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, no more than a half hour away, which we would have been well advised to have gone to that place and soaked up whatever we could learn from it before we got going on in the garden. So we've had a learning experience, which we might have done better by doing other things. But now we have about 60 specimens from, we have 2 from Japan, the variegated Japanese pine and a katsura trees that bought by my son Emlyn and his wife Hideko. What we do is, some people want to have a tree memorialized, so we let people put the name of the tree and the Latin name of the tree and say gifted in honor of. And that's about all we permit, because we don't want any change for each person. Everybody's the same. They don't, maybe their name's different, but they get the same there. And one time they wanted to, fade a select man who'd been faithful to the town. And I said no, and I'm glad I did, because again, everybody's even-footed there. But it's been a real joy to work together as we have over the years. For most of the time, she has tractor cut the green, which is the ball field, Garrett Green. That's off of Cross Road. And then this one is at the corner of the main corner of the town, has a church and the town hall right there, almost contiguous to the garden. Right now, I'm having my next project there. We wanted an entry garden, Ann wanted an entry garden, so we got Tomich to set that one up for us. He's a landscape architect. And then we had a fern garden, which abuts the entry garden, and that Tomich put it in. Now, because my wife is in decline, I want to give her a garden within a garden. And as Tomich envisions it, it's going to be a bald cypress grove, and it will be somewhat like a room. And I can't envision really what he's got in mind, but I think it's going to, bald cypress is deciduous, but it's so beautiful and delicate, and I think it'll be very happy where we want to put it. So that will be in her honor. And I think she's quite enthused about it. Whether I'll ever be able to get her up there and see it is questionable. I'm hoping maybe this August I would be able to get her up. She used to come see me there for the month of August, and I'm not sure that's going to work this year, but she'd come down here. She's never going to come back here, I don't think. So, but that garden is a really wonderful thing that two people who started out together in life as puppy love friends and then got to be married at 64, and we had 20 years of good fun working on that baby together. The thing that's exciting about now is that for 4 or 5 years I've been trying to get an old schoolhouse moved to the town center. And it may be, I bet last year I bet against it, but it looks like there's a reasonable possibility that it may come to center town. And we're doing some fundraising now, and there's a lot of work by an ad hoc committee to make certain that the town feels comfortable having it done. But my younger brother Harry has walked the ground, and he's got a place that he feels it would be the highest part in the garden, good setting for it. So it's really fascinating how it's a whole adventure at our time in life, doing things we never thought of doing. But it's given us motivation to have projects in our latter years that would benefit the public. And that gets me to close to one of the final stages of this presentation of the life of Alfred Crowe Garrett II. For some years, probably 20 years, I've been interested in creating a trust. The trust would be 3 generations. I've spent a lot of time on this, and I've had attorneys craft the instruments, but the attorney said to me, "Man, you must stay up at night to do these schemes." At any rate, it's set up for 3 generations. My sons and their wives, if they have them. And then my grandchildren, as mentioned earlier, I've got a lot of 20 grandchildren from 3 different family blendings. And so when the last one died, which is, let's say, 80 years, the corpus will be distributed very widely. During that 20 years, I've been looking around for missions that I felt comfortable with as far as donating to the community of the world. And actually, there are only two that are not in the United States. One is for the benefit of the Indians in the eastern part of Peru along the Napo River. And then they get pumps for potable water and stuff like that. And the other one is in Gambia in Africa. And that's where the girls there usually marry so young they don't get educated. So this is for the purpose of educating young women from Gambia to get some formal education. And I actually have met one lady who was a teacher, I think of mathematics, I'm not sure about this, but she teaches at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And she's an example of this program, which was founded by a guy named Mike McConnell, who lives in Emeryville, California. And I learned of it through him coming to the mountain to see his good friend, Morgan G. Bulkley. They call him Amby. So that's a mission that I felt strongly towards the educating of young black women there, and also the one concerning the Indians of South America. Now, in the United States, I've lived most of my life in Sarasota, Florida, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Mount Washington, Massachusetts. So that it is restricted to those general areas. I've got approximately 24 grants in different things. They consider a number of churches, colleges, cultural things, CCC, yeah. For example, like ballet and orchestra of Sarasota. My wife and I enjoyed that immensely. As a matter of fact, I did a lot of work on one of the trust areas at a performance of the Sarasota Orchestra on a Sunday afternoon some years ago. This is one of the most interesting things to me because though I was not a good student, I love education from a growth experience of the mind. And I was privileged to have attended 7 different academic institutions. So one afternoon at the orchestra, I said to her, I'm going to be working on that. I decided that I wanted to give each one of them, starting at $25,000, and that it would be variable depending on what I got out of the experience. And of course, the first one, I went to a Germantown Friends School for kindergarten and first grade. Penn Charter was the second one through the 9th grade. Came to Sarasota, so 10th, 11th, and 12th at Sarasota High School. That was the first public school that I ever attended, and it was good for me to attend it. It wasn't necessarily educationally the most sound approach, but it was definitely good because it got me with all kinds of kids, and that was good for me. Also, I had a very good career in football there. I enjoyed that. But then I went on to Florida State, and that's the first place that I flat out failed academically. And my purpose was trying to help kids in the future when I got to fooling around with money towards them, to where they wouldn't get in trouble like I did, getting them counseling and things like that. And then I went in the military, and then I came out of the military, and then I went to, as I said earlier, Hotchkiss School, and that got me into Harvard College. And I really shouldn't have gone back to Philadelphia because I know now that I have definite, it's depressing for me to not have sun in my life. So I loved living in Florida where it got sunshine, and I came back here after Haverford. And the last college I should have gone to in the first place was Rollins College up in Winter Park, Florida. I had a wonderful career there. It's funny because I got back into sports and I never played soccer, and I became an all-conference goalie on a championship team. So that was fun there, but more importantly, I loved the study of philosophy. And I really got a lot out of that. People say, well, why would you study philosophy? Well, you know, that's somewhat man's approach to trying to figure the system of the world out. And you know, I told you earlier, I was trying to figure God out. You know, I was seeking God throughout my life. And one is a material thing, that's the philosophy. The other one, to me, is more of a faith and the wonderment of mystery. And so I think that's the reason, one of the reasons I could see an analogy between the philosophy and studying religion. So actually, my wife did study at Mount Holyoke philosophy and religion. She majored, and we have granted to them charitable reminder trust for the benefit of the philosophy departments of those two schools. So that's, but those are the kinds of things that this trust is set up to do. It's to, for example, I got very interested in kids. So there are at least two things for younger kids that need a boost. And then I, for years, have been very intrigued with a retirement home that will take you in. If you don't have the money to last yourself out, they'll take care of you. Their foundation will take care of you for the rest of your lives. That's the Pines, done by Arthur Goldberg in 1947 in North Sarasota. I think it's a wonderful mission. And so there are things like that that resonate for me and that I really get enjoyment thinking about giving broadly to society. One of them came up in an interesting way. I got a letter years ago from a girl whose name was Julie Reich. She was contacting me because she worked for the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia in the ornithology laboratory, and she wanted to know perchance whether I was related to Edward Drinker Cope. He lived from about 1842, just before the turn of the century, as I recall, not 55 years, something like that. He was a very interesting forebear. He was my great-grandmother's older brother. So I said, yes, that's my great-grandmother's older brother. So then she invited me to come down to the Academy of Natural Sciences, me, my wife, and her sister, and her husband, who was the librarian of Hagley Library for the DuPonts in Wilmington, Delaware. So we went down there on a day, and they showed us the tome with Drinker Cope. He wrote 1,920 scientific papers in ornithology, paleontology, and ichthyology. He never went to college, but he was a very brilliant man. And that book is, there's only one other in the world that I know of. And my cousin Suzanne had that in her living room, and I said, well, you better put that thing somewhere where it doesn't burn up if the house burns down. So I think she's arranged that. But it's a rare object to see. It's amazing because it's about 2 feet long and 1.5 feet wide and about 6 inches. It's amazing. Where, of course, it's all in hands. That was in the Academy of Natural Sciences. Then we went to the ornithology, and there I found birds that Drinker Cope had preserved in the 1860s. A lot of yellow birds, warbirds, I think. And then we went to lunch with the president, and then we saw some of the bones that he had found in Wyoming and Montana and, places out there. Most of his bones are in the Academy of Natural Sciences, Natural History in New York City. He fought a battle with Othniel Marsh, who was a professor at Yale, for these bones out there. And Marsh was a cousin of Peabody, who was a big banker in England. And so he had all kinds of money. Drinker Cope went broke, and but he had a thirst for knowledge, that kid. So we had a wonderful time there. At the time, I just thought about taking care of a tuppence each year, and then it came to me. I thought I'd like to make a good grant to that place. It was in Philadelphia, just as are the colleges and schools of the schools that I had attended there, which I also thought about. And so I said, I want to get in touch with Julie Reich first. It's her idea. And when I got through to the academy, they researched and told me that she had died 1 year before I had this idea. So it makes me very sad to realize that she had a good idea and it worked in one instance. But her name will be part of the grant. The guy that's most interested in the grant is Nate Rice, who is the head of the Department of Ornithology, and he knows that Drinker Cope also was in ichthyology and paleontology, and he wants the money to come to the ornithology department. And I think that's going to work itself out. We talked about it, and we tried to legally get it set up that way. But that's one of the fun things about life. You never know where an opportunity is going to come from. Particularly if you have some people call it, I have a donor gene. I'm afflicted with a donor gene. Well, that's the story of the trust in general. And I think that I've shot most of my bolt about my life. I've tried to be candid where I could be. Although I've been generous, I wanted to be generous, especially to my 3 wives. I was not an easy person to live with. And I live alone of my choice now. I don't think I'll ever live with anybody again. But life has been a glorious experience for me. God gave me so many wonderful people to know and to love. There's so many glorious times being on this earth and searching to the skies and the heavens for the God that's been so good to me, grant this life to Alfred Cope Garrett II. Fine. Fine.